Have you spoken to many victims of the Rochdale rape gangs?
I've spoken to quite a few over the last few years, and I've worked professionally with one or two of them as well. Stories are harrowing. There was one of the original Rochdale girls. My charity worked with about 10 years ago. We were trying to get a job. She left Rochdale, escaped to Manchester, and that's when my charity started working with her. We tried to get her a job, and then one day she disappeared, and then we bumped into her again 2-3 years later, and she was homeless in the city centre. And this is how sad it is. She was at one of the hostels to have something to eat and have a shower because she smelt. And she asked one of my workers, she said, "Can you come to the bathroom with me and sit outside the bathroom door so I can have a shower?" And we said to her, "No need, there's big locks on the door, you'd be perfectly safe." She says, "No." She goes, "I can't go in the bathroom unless someone's guarding the outside, because I've been in bathrooms before where men bathed me and then they raped me. So I need someone guarding that door." So my member of staff sat outside the door in the city centre at a hostel so she could have a shower, so she'd feel safe. That's the long-term damage done to some of these individuals. And then some of the other survivors I've spoken to have been at some of the demonstrations I've attended, some of the street talks I've been involved in, and the stories are harrowing, and it's the same story over and over again. Being ignored, being treated as if they're an underclass, people putting their jobs and career ahead of their fellow citizen being abused, being raped. And I can understand sometimes that, somebody may not believe the person, but surely you would do something, even if it's just to make sure that what they're saying wasn't true. But these are the stories I get all the time. I've been involved in this now for 15-20 years.
You're telling me, this girl in particular, she smelt, and this was, I'm assuming this was a kind of a long-term consequence of an inability to shower because of what these men did to her, yeah?
Well, at that point she was homeless.
She was homeless as well.
Hence why she was she went to the homeless shelter that day for something to eat and to get showered, because she was living in a squat, which was basically a derelict building in the city centre. But that's what they've done to her. They've broken her that much. She can't stay with family because her family and friends all live in Rochdale. She doesn't want to be in Rochdale, so she had to flee Rochdale. No money, ends up on the streets, ends up meeting people who are living in a squat, and that seems a better alternative than staying with a family and friends who live in Rochdale. That takes some doing.
So they deliberately, these girls, they deliberately choose to be homeless over going with a family member because it might make them having to revisit the areas to which they were raped by these men. Is that correct?
In that particular case, absolutely, and I know that to be truthful because that's what she said to us. She would rather live on the streets in Manchester city centre than live in a house in Rochdale with her family and friends, because at least in the city centre, even though she said it's scary and it's dangerous out here, I'm more at risk when I'm in Rochdale.
That's absolutely, terrifying. When I was doing the research for this project, I was looking online at some of the stories of what these men did to these girls, and honestly, I'm not somebody who breaks down often, but these wanted to make me break down, and to hear them come from someone else who dealt with it, I don't know how I would have been able to do that. It's absolutely harrowing and horrifying what these men did to these girls. And this kind of brings me on to what you've said there kind of brings me on to my next questions. I mean, what are the horror stories to which you can tell us have you heard from some of these girls who have been raped and, raped and groomed and injected with drugs by these men?
Yeah, I've dealt with several dozen young people who have been victims of child sexual exploitation. Not all of them, most of them weren't connected to the grooming gangs, but they all suffer the same. And the golden thread that goes through all these young people is they wanted to be loved. They wanted attention, and that attention was what they thought was love. And that can come from a poor childhood, poor parenting, there's lots of reasons why a child feels like that. There was a 12-year-old girl we worked with, and she was 12, she looked 12, and she had 7 sexual partners at 12 years old.
7.
7 sexual partners at 12 years old. And what she'd realised is, and she came from a single parent household, her mum had a different boyfriend every couple of months. And she learnt by the age of 12 that how you get attention and love is by having boyfriends and letting boys and men do whatever they want to you. And that's love. And hence why she got herself in that situation, and to be abused. So this is more than just evil Pakistani Muslim men. It's an indictment on our whole society that we allow our children to be brought up with a lack of love, a lack of attention, a lack of self-respect, that they've got to allow themselves to be abused because they think that's love. How we've damaged our children in this country, I don't know how we did it, but we've done it. There's so many children who are quite willing to be abused at the time because they think that's a loving relationship.
Do you think this even extends into adult promiscuity? Because we've seen with adult porn stars like Bonnie Blue, who slept with, I think it's 1,027 men in 12 hours or something stupid like that. Then you had Lily Phillips, who slept with 100 men in a couple of hours or something. And they, you know, I mean, even after Lily Phillips was in tears, she was dissociated, and to them it's, you know, and that's obviously a trauma response. Do you think that even adult promiscuity has something to do with the lack of attention and love, or the attention seeking, not attention seeking, but the fact that that person in particular wants love and attention, and that's how they think they get it, by allowing themselves to be abused? Because even consensually, sleeping with 1,027 men in 12 hours is still abuse. It's
self-abuse. It's like cutting your arms. It's like starving yourself. It's still abuse. Even if your tyrant is yourself, it's still tyranny that you're living under. Absolutely. It all comes from the breakdown of the family post Second World War. It's about not having men and fathers at home, because we think that's a detriment to boys. It's also a detriment to girls. The lessons girls learn by having a father at home is they get to see what a decent man looks like, what a decent husband does for his wife, that there is no violence, that it's a partnership. They get to see the loving exchanges. They get to see what real love looks like. But on top of that, we've got social media, we've got Hollywood, we've got TV that shows the complete opposite. It shows that to be a young, powerful woman, sleep around, dress like a hooker, you know, dress like a pole dancer. That's how you're an empowered young woman these days. We keep sending the wrong messages because we keep thinking it's old-fashioned. All those values we've had for thousands of years, suddenly we class as old-fashioned. And we wonder why our girls and boys and our men and women in this country are failing. Over 5,000 men in this country kill themselves every year. 20% of British women are on antidepressants. Suicide rate in young people's high. Self-harming in girls. The trans ideology in young girls is out of control. We're damaging our children all the time. And then you wonder why we have sexual predators who then see these vulnerable, damaged children and go, easy meat there. All I've got to do is buy them a KFC and they think I'm a god. And that's why these perverted men are getting away with it and are getting access, because we don't protect our children anymore. That's what a father should do. We have a father in the home because that's a message to everybody else in the community that there's a protector in this house. And if you mess with children in this house, you mess with the protector, and that might lead to violence. So a pervert is going, those girls have got a dad at home. I don't know if he's violent or not, but why take the chance? Because those girls on the corner don't have a dad at home. They'll be a lot easier to abuse. So we've let our children down, but also we should never forget these perverted men are the ones who committed the crimes, and we need to punish them. And I know, me personally, death penalty, that's why we created the death penalty for stuff like this.
That, you mentioned something interesting there as well about them picking on the vulnerable girls. That's exactly how grooming gangs work. They target the vulnerable, and they drive it. If not necessarily vulnerable, but they drive a wedge between them and their parents and stuff like that, and make, force them in a position where they are vulnerable. What I've noticed is they target these care homes that are meant to look after kids. And you mentioned about us failing, or society failing to protect our kids. Well, a perfect example of that may be that in these care homes, if they see a car pull up outside with gangs of men, and a girl from that care home who's under the age of 16 gets into that car, they're not allowed to do anything, and that 99% of the time the police won't turn out. Is that a problem that you see plaguing Rochdale, Oldham and the Greater Manchester area as well, or?
This problem I've been seeing for 20 years. Our children homes and our child protection services do not work. They are a sham. How do I explain this? We have staff working we have staff working with the most vulnerable children in society. You're most vulnerable when you've lost your parents for whatever reason. You're now on your own. Your biological protectors have gone. You're now vulnerable to everything. And the staff who look after you are on minimum wage. And most of them will be people who are not from this country. So we're importing people to work with the most vulnerable. We're giving them poor wages because we allow anyone to do that job. There's a basic police check, of course there is. But apart from that, anyone can work with the most vulnerable children in society. It's been common knowledge now for 30, 40 years in the UK, and every study has confirmed this, that if you leave an abused child with its parents, that child will do better in life than if we take that abused child away and put it in a children's home. So a child being sexually, emotionally, physically abused will do better in life if we leave that child with its parents who are abusing it, because our care system is so bad that we make sure those children come out worse in life when we take them away. Part of that will be the services, but part of it is, even if your parents are abusive, you still love your parents. There's that bond there, that's that biological bond we can't break. So when we rip children away from their parents, even if they're poor parents, we've already damaged that child. Hence why social services over the last 20, 30 years really don't want to take children away, because they know it's damaging. Plus the councils know it's expensive. So the councils don't want to do it because that's going to save us a fortune now.
You mentioned as well there that they kind of let anyone do these jobs, and I think a prime example of that is Shabir Ahmed, the ringleader of the Rochdale Grooming gang, who worked for the
Oldham Council.
Oldham Council as a welfare rights officer between the years of 1988 and they say it was 2006, which is interesting because I can only find a record of him being fired in 2008, 3 years after an investigation began into him. So we're going to definitely touch on that in a bit, because the entire system there and the entire failure, there was a massive failure between the GM. There was a lack of coordination, wasn't there, between all the authorities to protect children. And you would have thought that there would have at least been some sort of multi-agency safeguarding risk assessment to ensure that no other child was hurt by this man that was employed by the council, or at the very least he was fired from his job where he was in control, he was in a position of trust to vulnerable adults and children, and as we know, he later actually abused someone within his care while he was under investigation. So it's a disgusting failure by the state. So you mentioned a bit about substance abuse issues. Now, when speaking to Billy Howarth, I understand that a lot of these girls are still dealing with substance abuse issues, right? They're dealing with self-harm, and they're dealing with an abundance of issues stemming from their trauma that was inflicted to them, typically on children, but also as adults. Now these are girls who have sometimes been waiting for help since early 2012. So they've been waiting for help, they've been homeless on the streets, and no one has provided any help to them, apart from organisations like Parents Against Grooming and quite a few others around this area. Now, what systems do you believe should be in place to deal with the traumatic aftermath of what these girls go through?
Anyone who's been abused, and especially these girls from the grooming gang, abuses and atrocities, are extremely damaged, and they're going to be, the vast majority of them will be damaged for life. Now, how do we help them overcome that abuse and that trauma? Well, they need professional help and support, and councils will tell you we have that, but they don't, and the little bit they have is not enough for the people who need the help and support. They need some wraparound support, which means they need a panel of people to be looking at them going, what are their needs? Because at the moment it's all piecemeal. Oh, you're homeless because of this, we're about to get you a flat. So you get a flat for 2 years, but you've got no mental health support during that time.
Yeah.
So then you're using drugs then to dampen the pain you're feeling, and that puts you in a spiral. Then you lose your flat because you're a drug user and you've had parties in the house and things. None of it's coordinated. And the reason why it's not coordinated is why these girls, and some boys as well, let's not forget the boys, are not getting the help they deserve, is because the councils and the government still haven't accepted responsibility for this.
Yeah.
They just think these are one-off problems, these are horrendous incidents, but this was mass child abuse on an industrial scale that I put the main blame at the feet of the councils and all our governments last 40 years. This isn't just a Labour problem. We shouldn't let Tories get away with this. They've been in power 14 years. They did nothing, and we expect Labour to do nothing as well. They just need a coordinated approach to find out exactly what support they need. But it's hard to get them the support when the councils are still saying it's not our fault. We don't really believe these girls. These girls' lifestyle choices contributed to that. So you're not really a victim, are you? Because you brought this upon yourself. So until the whole attitude in the councils change, these girls won't get the service not only they deserve, but they need. And councils are really bad at customer service. So I used to work for Manchester Council for 10 years. The council approaches, this is what we can do for you, take it or leave it. Where's the customer service on that?
Yeah.
So if one of these girls don't actually want the service they're providing for them, well, give them a choice of services they can have. Just because they don't want A doesn't mean they don't want any services and any support, but we give them a take it or leave it. And we wonder why a lot of the young people and some of the girls go, well, I don't want support of you. Because first of all, I blame you. You work for the council. I blame you for this. And now you're going to pretend to help me. I don't trust you. So having the councils lead on this is probably wrong as well. We need more organisations like Parents Against Grooming, because some of them were victims themselves and they know whose side they're on. But until the councils admit they were to blame for the majority of this, then I don't see how the councils themselves can fix the problem.
We hope you enjoyed this latest video from Vox Populi. To watch the full video for free, please check out our website, voxpopulimedia.com. Thank you for your support.